Hello everybody, and welcome to Some Patches Required, a show where we hope to educate and entertain you on the ever-turbulent games industry. As always, I am one of your hosts, Aaron.
And I'm your other host, Zach.
And this week we are, once of course, back at it, talking this time about the somewhat surprising, well at least to me, depending on who you ask, this may have been sort of in the rumor mill for a while, but the Long Nation DLC for The Witcher 3, which has brought up some interesting sort of side thoughts and conversations betwixt Zachary and I that we thought we would bring to the show. But before we jump too deeply into that, as always, to all of our new and returning listeners, thank you so very much for joining us. I hope that you've been enjoying the show, and if this is your first time with us, please don't click away yet. I know there's no video, we're working on that, but we will be entertaining, I promise. There will be a very loud, startling noise somewhere in here to kind of Citizen Kane jar you back into awakeness. But all joking aside, if you do not mind too terribly hitting the engagement button on your platform of choice, that is, of course, very much appreciated, as is any effort to share the show with a friend, or as we often like to say, a mortal enemy. You helping to spread the word about the show is really the best and only way that we grow, and we really, really appreciate that. So anything you can do in that front would, of course, be outstanding in the extreme.
Yeah, we are excited about this one today, specifically because I didn't think there was going to be a time where The Witcher 3 would come up as a full discussion topic unless something horrific happened. Realistically, just because I feel like older games don't get a lot of attention certainly after they've been out for, 3+ years, and certainly when they're not a live service game. So it's exciting to reflect on one of the games that I think is probably one of people's favorite games of all time, at least in recent memory. The Witcher 3 gets cited as one of the most beloved games, certainly of my lifetime, by quite a few people.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a reasonably fair thing. The idea that this game, which is like 11 years old currently, came out in 2015, I believe, which would have been, Zach, you and I, like right in our, I think it was, if I'm not getting the release date incorrect, I think it was in the latter half of our freshman year of college, or the first half of our sophomore year of college. And I remember this was like the showcase game for my gaming PC that I built right at the end of high school, and I spent a lot of time in college playing The Witcher 2, and then got some way into The Witcher 3. And yeah, it is certainly interesting to kind of have the Witcher 3 back in the zeitgeist. Not that it necessarily ever left, because kind of to your point about it being one of the more beloved and more well respected and well regarded games of the last 10+ years. I did some looking at like concurrent player counts on SteamDB. And I mean, obviously its peak is some sort of ridiculous north of 100,000 concurrent players thing. But the wild bit for me was that the concurrent player count almost never, I mean, I didn't see any counts since the beginning of it being tracked that were lower than 10,000. And that was in April of 2016, I believe, was the lowest it ever dipped. And if you were to look at it, at least as of the time of the recording, the current player count is somewhere just shy of 30,000, about 28,500 players currently in the game. And I mean, I'm sure some of that has to do with people, popping back in to, play the game before the DLC actually launches when it is set to launch, which is looking like next year sometime. But that having been said, if you were to just look at the actual graph, it has been remarkably consistent in terms of this game not dipping beneath 10, 15, 20,000 concurrent players for the better part of the last decade, which is wild. That's a wild level of success for a single player game.
The interesting thing I'm seeing on SteamDB, because I'm actually looking at the chart now too, is that there are two big bumps. Technically there's three, but one of them isn't annotated here. The first big bump after the launch of the game was in January of 2020. And if you remember, that's actually when the Witcher TV series came out. And that's technically when it reached its all-time peak, was when the first season of the Witcher series came out. And then when the second season came out, the game got another big bump of players in January of 2022. So that's just kind of an interesting call out, because we've done some episodes specifically on the Fallout series in the past and how some of these TV series that are based on game franchises can actually have some pretty positive impacts for at least player counts. Who's to say what this has done for the number of sales for the game? I will say it is interesting how many copies have sold. I can't say how many have sold because of specific seasons. I didn't look at that specifically, but The Witcher 3 as of this year has surpassed 65 million copies. And then just for some other quick notes, I mean, I think people generally know what The Witcher 3 is and how popular it was, but on Metacritic, the Metascore, which is, of course, the score provided by reviewers, is at 92, which is incredibly strong, and the user score is right there with it at 9.1. So, super beloved game, has sold over 65 million copies, which is completely insane, which makes it actually the 8th best-selling game of all time, just beating out Super Mario Bros., which is at 58 million copies sold. So that's kind of a wild statistic I found online. But specifically what we're going to be chatting about today, because you've kind of been bearing the lead a little bit here, we're going to be talking about the fact that not too long ago, I'm trying to find the exact date here, they, I think it was late last month or earlier this month, they announced that there was going to be a DLC coming out called Songs of the Past, which is a full-on expansion. It's going to be massive, just like Blood and Wine, and it will release, as you said, Aaron, in 2027, which is a total of 12 years after the game was released, and a total of 11 years since the last DLC for the game, which was Blood and Wine. And it's being co-developed by a company called Fool's Theory, which is a co-dev studio. They actually have some of their own IP. We might get into that a little bit. But that is the story, so to speak, is this DLC is coming out well over 10 years from when the base game launched. So it's just very weird. This does not happen very much, Aaron, as you know, and certainly doesn't happen very much in the AAA space, for sure.
No, it definitely does not happen a lot in the AAA space. You had done some work in terms of like trying to pull a handful of examples of games that had, post-release content way post, kind of like this, and I think you'd found and I'm going to mess up the pronunciation of this quite terribly, but the Kingdoms of Amalur, Fatesworn, which was 10 years after the game's original release in 2012, give or take 10 years. Diablo 2 Resurrected, Reign of the Warlock is about 25 years late, based on the original 2000 release date of Diablo 2 and the 2026 release date of that expansion. And then, you have Binding of Isaac doing the Repentance version as opposed to the really hyper mega popular Rebirth in 2014 and then the original release in 2011. So these sort of long nation expansions just don't happen very often and certainly don't happen at this scale of development very consistently. I find I don't know, I find it absolutely fascinating. And it kind of takes me into elements of one of our larger discussion points, which is that this to me in a lot of ways feels like the sort of almost multimedia tie-in that you would see in a live service game. It feels like they're treating The Witcher 3 as a platform, not as a finished single player product that was technically, tied up in a nice bow over a decade ago. uh, which is bonkers to me, that they would do that, because we just don't see it very often. It's not completely uncharted territory, but it is deeply uncommon. And it does raise questions for me about the sort of perception we have of forever games as being inherently tied to the live service or the games as a service model. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily, the vanguard of some seismic shift in the industry, but it is at the very least indicative of something, which to me at least warrants conversation.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing that you're kind of alluding to is there is a way that game development used to work in the past, which was largely a ship it and forget it model, which is to say that you would release the base version of your game, you would maybe have some DLCs that would come out for the following year to 2 years, and then after that you would never touch the game again, outside of maybe making a sequel or two.
Yep.
There now is this live service model that's applied to way more games, where you don't ship it and forget it, you ship it and support it. And you can do that even for, games like The Last of Us 2 and whatnot. Like, they'll get updates for a long period of time. But there's also these live service games, and they are constantly being iterated on for years. I mean, we just talked about Destiny, which was out for like almost 10 years, getting continually worked on with new expansions, DLCs, cosmetics, in-game purchase items, all that kind of stuff, right? And that's kind of the new model. So the interesting thing about what's going on with The Witcher right here is it's almost kind of a hybrid of the two, at least with this current expansion. Now, will The Witcher 3 get more expansions after this one? That remains to be seen. My gut feeling is no. And I don't think that they've alluded to there being more expansions for The Witcher 3, but this definitely does pose an interesting question, because what happens if this new DLC, Songs of the Past, does incredibly well? Because there is a massive amount of players that have played this game, have enjoyed this game, and if it, brings in a ton of people, CDPR, they're big enough that they could certainly make ripples in the industry, and other companies will be looking at them and might take some lessons from this and be like, oh, we've got some IPs that we haven't touched in a while. Maybe it's worth trying to develop DLCs for them, because it's going to be cheaper to work on a DLC for an older game than it is to work on an entirely new title, right?
Right.
So that's what's going to be interesting to see in the future. Will this end up being a massive trend across the games industry? It's kind of hard to tell. Ultimately, it's going to come down to cost versus revenue generated. But I do think there's a world where this might become a bit of a different business model that you can make for your games, where instead of it being this like super hyper aggressive live service content kind of a thing, it's much more of a staggered release of DLC.
Yeah, where there is this sort of extremely rarefied strata of single player game that has, engendered such goodwill with its community that it does maintain player counts higher than the launch numbers of many, many, many games. The biggest examples of which, of course, remain even the single player people for GTA 5. Who are still, not necessarily engaging hardcore with the online component, but are still, playing GTA 5 just because they like being in that world. If Rockstar were to announce that in the wait for GTA 6, they were releasing a big story expansion for GTA 5, that thing would put up crazy numbers, because people would just flock back to that game and treat it like a platform, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think it's deeply... It is a privileged position that CD Projekt Red finds itself in on the back of the success of The Witcher 3 and the back of the success of what it was able to do with Cyberpunk following a notoriously bad, just terrible, legendarily terrible launch. But yeah, for games like this that either have very active player bases, years after release, or have that nostalgia factor and are still playable on current hardware, it absolutely could be a new revenue stream. It 100% could be. If this does well, people may take note of the fact that a support studio can build a good, tonally resonant expansion and plop it down into an existing game that doesn't need to be supported endlessly and continually by an active team, but can have resources devoted to it every so often. That seems to me like a bit of an optimistic read, but it also seems like a more sustainable model than games as a service. It seems like a less exhausting model than games as a service, and it does seem like the sort of way to give life to an older title rather than just letting your IP collect dust. So yeah, I definitely, I'm excited by the concept, if I'm being honest. I think the idea of allowing development teams to go back and play with their old toys is a deeply compelling pitch. I think obviously there's limits to what can be done with that, especially as you cross over console generations, and we will actually get into that angle of things here momentarily. But I just find the concept at large to be so different and almost refreshing. Even though, I mean, like, I get it, it all plays into the same exact, thing. And it is ultimately part of like a larger multimedia strategy that's no more, I mean, it's not inherently better, but it is so much different that it grabs me. It grabs me and tickles me in the interesting ways.
That makes it seem kind of sensual.
Well, not so much that. A thematic and ideological ticklage.
Yeah, it tickles your brain in the good way. Yeah, I mean, I think the important caveat with this, from my perspective, is releasing a DLC. I mean, I would say even potentially 5 years after your game has come out, let alone 10, is not something that every single studio and every single IP will be able to take advantage of, because
100%.
I think it's important to put The Witcher 3 in the position that it's in, which is to say it's this massively important game. We talked about all the sales numbers, the Metacritic scores, whatever, right? It's this game that everyone has this massive attachment to, that's probably going to be there for the majority of that person's life, right? Like, this is a formative experience kind of a game. And so they could wait 20 years and then probably release a DLC for The Witcher 3, assuming that there wasn't like a Witcher 4, which there would be by that point, and people would probably play it, right? Like,
it's the same reason that Todd Howard's going to keep releasing Skyrim until people can no longer read.
Yeah.
Like, it's just never going to end, because the game is its own industry at this point. Skyrim is an industry within Bethesda, regardless of what else they're making. The same would be true of The Witcher. It's like that level of success. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I mean, yeah, that's a perfect other example how Oblivion is this cultural, touchstone for a lot of people in gaming. What else? Like Final Fantasy games, Kingdom Hearts. Like, I know Kingdom Hearts, obviously, some of the latter ones have gotten a lot of hate, but regardless, like, these are games that have a lot of meaning for specific people, regardless of the passage of time. And so I think for this to be a meaningful way of generating revenue, you need to do it with IPs that it makes sense to do it for, The Witcher being one of them. In addition to that, I think it's also interesting to look at the Diablo 2 example with Reign of the Warlock, which came out in 2026. Which for some reason I thought it came out last year. I did not realize it came out this year, that DLC. So that really threw me off. But regardless of that, I do think there's also an approach where you could do like a remastered version of your game or a remake of your game and then add DLC onto it. So like talking about Skyrim, if you look at Oblivion, which just got its remake last year, if they made a new Oblivion DLC, I'm sure it would sell quite well, even though that's for an older game. But I wouldn't be surprised if they did an Oblivion DLC for just the remaster and not for the original version of the game.
Oh, I would be surprised if they did it any other way.
Yeah.
Just, moving forward, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think if we're trying to like take this concept for revenue generation and take it out of like the pipe dream sort of blue sky idea and try to like practicalize it, yeah, absolutely. Releasing something like this in tandem with an updated or, re-released version of a nostalgic game is a much more economical way to sort of do this, right? Because I mean, it definitely starts to feed into hardware sales. It means you can resell the base game in order to give people access to this updated or new content. For something as old as Oblivion, I don't even know that. I actually would be really interested to see what the install base would be for new DLC on a game that old. And I'm also not even sure what like development tools would look like in terms of trying to release something on a game that old. That I think would probably end up being a pretty big hurdle as well. But yeah, I mean, like tying the expansions to remastered or remade versions of older games absolutely makes sense. I definitely think you run the risk of really pissing people off by never allowing the original game to sort of expand beyond where it was when it was finally sunset. Like no more expansions were set to come out for the original Oblivion, and then the game just kind of got to live on in mods. And then suddenly they're like, oh, we're doing new Oblivion storylines, but it's only for the remastered version. I think that some people might feel frustrated and left behind by that, but I also think, practically speaking, the majority of people would understand. Yeah. And I think that it's definitely the sort of thing that could help be like a stopgap between these large releases, especially as AAA development seeks to find ways to make ballooning costs and development times more palatable to audiences. If you think about how long it's been since Fallout 4 came out, as an example, not that Fallout 4 is necessarily the game in the series that everybody's like jonesing to go back to, but it is the most recent one. If they were to announce a new expansion for Fallout 4 in tandem with the release of Fallout Season 3, or in tandem with the announcement of or maybe better yet, they remake Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas or something like that and announce a new expansion pack to go along with that in the time it takes them to get to Fallout 4, I think that fans would broadly consider that to be a positive thing. And I think that if there's a way to develop a remaster or a remake of one of those games along with an expansion in a way that's not the most bloated practice of all time, then yeah, you could absolutely be looking at a way to streamline development costs while maximizing profit by just utilizing IP that people already like and building on it in the way that we're describing. I can absolutely see that being... It's a lot less clean cut than we just made Fortnite, but in... I don't know. We made live service Fallout again. We made Fallout 76, but this time without the embarrassing launch. It's less clear cut than that, but I definitely think that it could be the sort of thing that would resonate.
The thing that you mentioned earlier that I think's interesting, that admittedly I hadn't even thought about as I was brainstorming all of this, is like the other important metric, if we're talking about this becoming a thing in the future, is, as you said, like development tools. Like, I don't know how easy it would be for Bethesda to iterate on Oblivion, like the original Oblivion, because I'm not sure what of the original, like, vestiges of Oblivion they even have access to. You know what I mean? Like, most of the people have been developing presumably on a newer version of the creative engine, whatever it's called, I can't remember, and probably haven't touched the 2004 or whatever version of it that Oblivion originally released in. And things have just gotten like so much better. Like, I do definitely think there would be a cost associated with going back too far back in time. And obviously that cost is alleviated if you do the whole Diablo 2 Resurrected thing.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good call out, because that is a thing that's really easy to just assume is like, oh, well, this is an older game. Like, you've already developed it and it's been there for a while. Like, clearly you have access to this old game and all the old builds and whatever. But I've heard plenty of horror stories where like very critical things get lost. Like the original version of a game build can't be found. And, all these things that just make iterating on like really, really old games difficult to do for a myriad of different reasons. And so, I think that's an important call out. That's an interesting one for sure. But it's kind of to summarize this section, as you and I have been talking about, it's like, this is not a thing that every single game will be able to take advantage of. Your game really has to be in the minds of, the people, so to speak. And if you wait too long for your DLC expansion, whatever it is, to come out, you might risk people completely forgetting about your game if your game's not as relevant to the times. Like, I dare say, and maybe I would get some hate for this, but I'm going to say it. Clair Obscur, absolutely fantastic game. Does Clair Obscur have the audience and the kind of cultural zeitgeist to have a DLC come out in 5 years if they never released anything until then? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that it does. I think it was a fantastic game that people loved, but I don't know that it has the cultural impact of some of these other titles that we've been talking about.
No, I think that's a very fair assessment. And that's more or less what I meant when I was talking about, like, the rarefied strata of games of this type. There just aren't that many games that have achieved this level of success. And I think Clair Obscur is a decent call out, right? Because it is great, right? It's a fantastic game. Absolutely phenomenal game. Captured the hearts and minds of tons of people and sold millions of copies and won every award conceivable and made people recontextualize AAA game development scale and scope and team size and experience and a million other things, right? None of that necessarily translates to sticking in the zeitgeist. And there's almost no sort of alchemical process that you can follow in order to perfectly recreate the success of any of these just big games. Some of it is just in the wind, right? And it is ethereal. It is the whims of the audience. What do they connect to? What is it about Skyrim that makes it Skyrim? That's very hard to determine, right? But you do need to achieve that level of success or something close to it in order for this to work. Now, with enough time and enough sort of saturation of the idea, it's possible that the window could widen on which games have an opportunity to do something like this. But I generally think that, especially at this moment, yeah, I mean, if it becomes the year 2032... and suddenly, the Sandfall Interactive decides that they're going to release Clair Obscur Expedition 33.5, the new expansion. I think that more people would err towards, oh, that game from a handful of years ago. Interesting. And then probably move on. It would be a little bit of a headline generator, mostly as a curiosity. But I don't know how many people would flock back to it in insane numbers. I think that's more the sort of game that needs to rely on a sequel or, more world building, as they've kind of alluded to within the Clair Obscur world. Like, make that into a larger platform itself. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I tend to agree with you that, even a game that beloved and well received might not have the same benefit as The Witcher 3, just in terms of, like, volume of support.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And then the only other thing I kind of thought you said, the only other thing you said that I thought was interesting, my God, can I English, is that it could piss people off. I think it could piss people off if you made a new version of a game like Oblivion, and then instead of supporting the older version with whatever update you're pushing out or expansion, you only, put it on the new one. I will say the interesting thing with The Witcher 3 is that a few different things are happening. I actually think this is potentially a good transition into the second big point that we wanted to chat about. It's still the same base game, right? So it's still The Witcher 3. This isn't like The Witcher 3 Resurrected or like remake, remaster, whatever. It is the same Witcher 3.
It'd be The Witcher 3 Master.
3 Master. Yeah, I guess that's fair. It's the same Witcher 3 that you would have bought on your PC, right? But they are going to be updating these systems requirements, and it will be a more taxing game for people after this next update. So basically, what does that mean? That means that this new expansion is only going to be available on PC, so no real change there, Xbox Series X or S, and then PS5. So for people who beat The Witcher 3 on their Xbox One when that was the latest console, which is what I did, we cannot play this new DLC on our old hardware, which, that is kind of shitty. And actually, even thinking about people that I don't know what the PC situation for certain people are, but I can imagine there's some people on PC that can support playing The Witcher as it is now. But when this next update comes out, maybe they can't run it anymore. I don't know what this new system requirements are. Like, I don't know how much more intense it'll get. So maybe that's not very realistic, but I could see a world where the new update comes out and then maybe some people can't play it anymore. And that game's essentially being borked for them if they're not able to revert the version of the game, which I think you can do in Steam. I've never messed with it, but I think you can do that. So it's maybe a non-issue, but kind of food for thought.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for whatever it's worth, I mean, like, my initial sort of flippant line would be my PC that I built in 2014, which could definitely play The Witcher 3 on pretty decent settings, will not be able to play this what's it, Songs of the Past expansion. I will not be able to play the updated version on that PC. Not that I've been doing a whole lot of playing on that PC in general, but yeah, I mean, like, there's a pretty hard cutoff there. I mean, some of the things that I had seen were it's going to require SSDs for faster loading time, which is obviously taken care of on your consoles, but for PCs, that is, an additional sort of component cost if that's not something that you're doing already, which most gaming PCs probably are by this point. There's, I think, going to be DirectX 12 mandated. And I want to say Windows 10 support might be ending. I'm not entirely sure about that last point. I saw that in a video that I had watched in preparation for this episode, but I hadn't had a chance to actually fact check that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, for instance, my PC, gonna get completely left behind. I'll be really interested to see what deck compatibility looks like, because I think that, as tempting as it would be to leave the deck's sort of humble capabilities in the rear view, I think that you'd be shooting yourself in the foot by not allowing people to continue playing The Witcher 3 on Steam Deck, because The Witcher 3 is routinely one of the higher, like, it's really played on people play it on the Steam Deck a lot. Yeah. It is routinely among the most played on deck games. So I think that is something that I'm hoping is still very much in the cards. I haven't actually seen anything on deck compatibility. And, to some degree, I think that if there's anything that's going to be contentious or controversial about this expansion, it will be the leaving the last gen consoles behind and leaving the original PC system requirements behind. I think that sort of mandating modern hardware to play an old game may leave a bad taste in some people's mouths. I think necessitating an entirely new purchase, not of an updated version of the game, but let me rephrase that. Not of a remastered or fully, redone version of the game, but of a just updated version that left you behind. I think necessitating the purchase of that on a new system might rub people the wrong way. I think that it certainly runs the risk more than, whatever that's going to cost, $15 or whatever it's going to cost. I have no idea. I haven't released numbers on that, but yeah, I can 100% see that rubbing people the wrong way, especially since The Witcher 3 is such a massive game, and I do not know where in the... I mean, Songs of the Past is pretty much definitively going to take place, I believe, before the events of The Witcher 3. Like, I think it's mostly a flashback sort of jam. But you don't necessarily know when you'll be able to access that, or like what sort of level gating there is, or like how much of the game you'll need to have completed in order to get to it. And that's a lot of time investment, not to even consider the money investment of needing to repurchase the game from modern hardware or upgrade your hardware to play the newer version of the older game. So yeah, there's a lot of different sort of components of that I don't necessarily begrudge the team, but do think could be a sticking point for some players.
Well, I can just say for me personally, because as you were talking, I was just doing some poking around, because yesterday I was out with some game devs and mentioned this issue and frustration, and they were like, oh, well, maybe you can use cloud save from Xbox in order to move your saves over to your computer because I don't have a next-gen Xbox. And so I was just looking into that, and the Xbox Store does not appear to have The Witcher 3 available on PC, which is to say I couldn't even utilize that feature because I can only buy this the game on Steam, as far as I'm aware. So I would potentially need to play the entire game all the way through all over again. Now, that's not entirely likely because I will say for Cyberpunk 2077, when they did the Phantom Liberty DLC that came out, you could actually get access to the DLC. I think maybe even from starting a new game, you could just jump in. I can't remember. Or you could get to the DLC after you did the little like intro thing, which doesn't take very long.
I'm pretty sure it's like right after the prologue.
Yeah, it's like right after it doesn't take very long. That being said, some people who are like myself, and this is fully just a dumb mental block thing, and I understand that, so people can make fun of me, whatever, but some people will want to have, a finished story before going into the DLCs, right? Some people just care about that stuff. Some people don't want stuff. Yeah. And so some people won't want to just make an entirely new save that hasn't been played on just to play a DLC where they don't have all of their, weapons, armor, potential interactions, right? Because who knows if this DLC will be impacted by choices that you've made. It sounds like probably not, to your point, if it's all in the past, like it's a flashback DLC. But we don't know. Like, the reality is we don't know. Those details haven't been shared entirely yet, as far as I'm aware, when I looked online. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me personally that's frustrating about this DLC is it feels like, one, I'd have to rebuy the game, which I just checked. It's a $40 game, so it's not full price, but it's still not cheap. I would have spent $100 on the game in total at this point. Actually, more because of the DLCs. And, I'd have to play through 116 hours of content to get to where I was, which is just a lot to ask, I think, to come back for a DLC that's, Blood and Wine was like fairly long, but it's probably going to be like 10 to 20 hours of content, which is not nothing, but.
No, it's wicked not nothing. That's an entire game. Like, depending on the sort of game it is, like I'm pretty sure that's more playtime than the new James Bond game has. That's like a 12 to 14 hour cinematic experience. Yeah. And this DLC that's probably going to be $15-$20 is whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I think some of this is the symptom of the fact that the DLC is, the expansion is coming to a 12-year-old game. I really do think that there's some measure of this that is largely unavoidable. And I also think that, updating the game as a platform moving forward isn't inherently a bad thing. Again, you do run the risk of leaving people behind and forcing them to do all of these things, but I don't necessarily begrudge the development team that, and I don't feel an extraordinary degree of manipulation here. It's very possible that they're just leaning into the, everybody at this point is sort of trying to jettison the last gen consoles to try and move current hardware, numbers just to get the install base up. So it's possible that there is some of that at play, but I don't know. It reads to me more as the experience that you want to publish in the year 2026 is probably a little bit shinier and a little bit better of frame rate than what you published in 2015. That just tracks for me. But yeah, definitely not great news for console players. I will say that. Definitely not great news for console players. I think if anyone's kind of getting the short end of the stick in regards to accessibility to the expansion itself, it is players on console. Whereas PC obviously just kind of rolls with it as long as you've stayed updated in terms of hardware. But yeah, I think that's probably the only notable sticking point in this story. The rest of it, I think, is broadly speaking interesting and positive.
Yeah, and the one thing I am going to comment on real quick, because I know someone's going to comment on this too, or could potentially, is apparently, and this is according to Copilot, so it could be wrong, but apparently the base Witcher 3 can be up to 30 hours long if you're just speeding through it, which is much more doable. I am, of course, referring to 100 hours because that's more of a completionist run where the world state is kind of where you want it to be. And again, I'm kind of picky, and regardless of what's going to happen, it's upsetting that I spent so much time in the game and none of that will be respected, basically. Unless I presumably buy a new Xbox and then buy The Witcher again. So just want to get out there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a good point. It is also technically conceivable that CDPR could create just like a generic cross-save system that would
like
allow
what
you
BioWare had with like the choices. It's like, what choices did you make in the previous Mass Effect game?
They could do that,
here.
but they could also genuinely just allow you to upload your saves. Like, it wouldn't be that hard to bypass the Xbox Cloud situation and literally just have your saved files, even if it's not accessible for the entirety of time. You know, if they make the tool usable for 6 months preceding the release of the expansion, followed by 6 to 8 months following the release of the expansion, you have time to pull your saves from PS4 to PS5. That would at least be something. I mean, like, it wouldn't stop the cost, or maybe they could create like an upgrade package, right? To buy the PS5 version off of the PS4 version, or the Xbox One to Xbox Series version, have a reduced price for those who've already, installed the game. I mean, there's ways that they could make that shift more palatable to players. Whether or not they do those may change my mental math on the inherent greed of the situation. But, ultimately, yeah, that's, I am sorry to hear, Zach, that your time is not being respected. And yeah, no, that sounded a lot more tongue-in-cheek than I meant it to. I mean, genuinely, it does kind of suck to have your time just jettisoned like that. So I'll be interested to see if they do come up with tools to sort of get around that process. But in the meantime, they may just also try to make the DLC as accessible as possible, like right from the jump of the game. Maybe up to and including even just like having it accessible from the menu. There's just no way to know yet. If that information's not out, it's just not out. And we're probably not going to know anything about that for, at the very least, several months, probably closer to 6 to 8 months into the first half of 2027 is my best guess.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that what'll probably happen is some kind of easy access to the DLC in the game. Jeez. Hiccup and a burp. I'm sorry. That was gross, y'all.
A burp up.
A burp up. Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think what'll probably happen is, like what we've said, just some kind of easy access from either the menu or very early on in the game. And then I think that it'll be relatively easy for you to probably move your progress from an Xbox One to an Xbox Series S or X, and then the same thing from a PS4 to a PS5. That's my gut feeling with those. And then PC, obviously, like, it's still the same game, so no issue there. I think that they probably won't support my situation just because the majority of players probably are not falling into my situation, and it's just going to be an unfortunate casualty of this process. I don't even think it's worth their time necessarily to support people like me, because I think it would be difficult potentially to pull saves from the cloud in Xbox or PlayStation and move it off. I doubt Xbox and PlayStation even want you doing that, because that would not get you out of their, ecosystem. So, I think I'm just one of the people in the unfortunate situation on this one, which sucks, but it's ultimately not a big deal. I'm happy for all of the people that have their saves in game states that can continue to play The Witcher. I think that's pretty cool overall. Or maybe I'm an idiot and I'm missing something that's incredibly obvious. I admittedly haven't done a ton of digging into how to get my save file yet, because this DLC doesn't come out for a year. So yeah, it ain't that deep for me yet. Only other thing that I personally found kind of interesting, Aaron, and I know we're kind of approaching the end here. So maybe I just list this as a statement and you can kind of give a quick response. And then if you've got anything else towards the end, feel free to bring it up. But there was an IGN article and they were saying that the, skeptic kind of like negative side of their brain was saying that they felt that this DLC coming out was an indication that there might be a delay to The Witcher 4 and CDPR's plan to release all of the Siri Witcher games, which I guess there's 3 that are planned and probably in some form of development that are planned to come out in the next 6 years, which is crazy to me. That's an aggressive timeline.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting. I think that's speculation. As far as I know, CDPR hasn't... Well, it definitely is speculation. CDPR hasn't said anything that suggests there will be a delay to the future Witcher games, but I did think it was kind of an interesting comment. The other interesting thing that I found through kind of investigating this was that the new Cyberpunk game is not going to come out until 2030, so I guess we have to wait 10 years between each installment of the Cyberpunk franchise, which I think is just kind of funny. Not relevant to any of this discussion, but I was like, wow, that's still a ways off.
Well, I mean, we'll catch up to 2077 at a certain point. Yeah, I mean, specifically in 2077. Yeah, I mean, okay, so in terms of the release date thing, I have a couple of different, and I'll try and keep it as quick as possible. One, I don't think that you need to have heard an announcement speculating that the plan to release 3 games the size of a sequel to The Witcher 3 in 6 years might result in delays. I don't think we need a headline to verify that, candidly. I think that considering we're talking about a 10-year, separation between Cyberpunk 2077 and the sequel to Cyberpunk 2077, and much more than a 10-year difference between The Witcher 3 and The Witcher 4, I think the idea that we're going to get 3 games, even the size of The Witcher 3, made and released inside of 6 years is a bit ambitious. You had mentioned, it's possible that they're going to do like a Tears of the Kingdom thing where they, shift mechanics and shift story, but kind of just reutilize the same basic map layout. And that would definitely do something to help sort of cut down on development time and cost. And there's a bunch of other ways to streamline that. But I just don't see a reality in which the 2020s version of AAA game dev scheduling, budgeting, resource allocation, resource management, and time management yield 3 games that size in 6 years. We haven't seen a game that size have a 2-year turnaround in the last decade. It just doesn't happen. I mean, maybe there have been a handful of examples of little things like that. It's just, it's deeply unlikely that they're going to be able to stick to that. And CD Projekt Red notoriously does not necessarily do so hot when their timetables are truncated. Cough, cough, Cyberpunk 2077. So yeah, my gut is, there's going to be delays. There just are going to be delays. If you look at the AAA release schedule for any AAA video game and expect there not to be delays, you just haven't been paying attention. So yeah, on that side of things for sure. In terms of does this expansion itself portend an inevitable release date push for The Witcher 4? No, not at face value. The game, like you said, is being co-developed by, was it Fool's Theory? Is that
Fool's
it?
Theory.
Fool's Theory? I almost said Fool's Errand. It's being co-developed by Fool's Theory, who are currently at work on the remake of The Witcher 1. And it seems to me that both this and the remake of The Witcher 1 are kind of both meant to drum up excitement for The Witcher 4, and get more people into the origins of the story, get more people invested in the world. We've got a bunch of new fans from the show that we haven't really capitalized on. So neither the Witcher 1 remake being developed by Fool's Theory or this being co-developed by Fool's Theory are probably pulling an insane number of resources from the core development team at CDPR who are working on The Witcher 4. So I don't necessarily think that resource management wise, we need to look at this as like a metaphorical arrow to the knee of the dev team at CD Projekt Red, because whatever their involvement is probably, not substantial enough to really change the math on The Witcher 4. That's my gut instinct. Again, baseless speculation, but I think that if a delay is going to happen, it's just going to happen because it was always going to happen. It's not going to happen because too many resources got put into a 12 years late DLC.
Well, I think the argument isn't that Fool's Theory and the DLC are pulling away so many resources that it will cause a delay. I think the argument is that the DLC is acting as a revenue injection to help the company make money between now and when The Witcher 4 is released. I think that's fair. More the argument. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, of course. I mean, they wouldn't be making it if they didn't want it to make them money. But I think that more so than like being the actual indicator of a delay, I think it is just the indicator of a diversified portfolio. I think that they're just trying to get as much out of this IP as they can, because it's a hot IP that has, crossed the boundaries of just straight video game players. It's no longer niche Polish novels. It's no longer niche, borderline unplayable, terrible inventory management system RPGs. It's no longer niche on the verge of a breakout, double to AAA quality, narrative driven, largely on rails RPG experiences. It is Skyrim. It's huge. It's Skyrim. It's Fallout. It's everywhere now. Of course they're trying to diversify. Get people back into The Witcher 3, get that concurrent player count up, get people hyped up for Witcher 4, drop a hot new remake of the original game that's actually playable for modern audiences, and then when Witcher 4 is ready, you're still in the zeitgeist. Makes sense. This is a strategy move. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think regardless of any of this, like, they're not doing anything that I would consider to be, like, a clear indicator of anything. I think it's more just weird when you suddenly drop a DLC for your game so many years later. And so I think that's why some people are speculating, like, oh, is there a deeper implication of this outside of just trying to get more hype around the game? And again, this is all speculation, and the person didn't even put that much weight on it, but I just thought it was an interesting thing to bring up. And then the last thing that I just wanted to mention, because I'm looking at some articles online, and we mentioned that 6-year number. To me, it's unclear exactly what this 6-year window means. So this is from a Polygon article. It says CDPR has reiterated its previously stated ambition to release a trilogy of new Witcher games, starting with The Witcher 4 within a 6-year window. I don't know if that means that the window starts when The Witcher 4 comes out, or if the window, I mean, it doesn't say the next 6 years, so presumably it's not, the window is not now. This is from an article that's from December of 2025. So that might be a little bit more doable, because I did just look up how much time was involved in the development of The Witcher 3, which took approximately 3.5 years. And as we've commented offline, Aaron, The Witcher 3 was a pretty big departure from what The Witcher 2 was, at least in the scope of it. My guess is that this series franchise will be probably more homogenous in terms of, what the games will feel like. They'll probably all be relatively similar to what The Witcher 3 was in terms of, being open world, over the shoulder, third person, action-y kind of games. So we'll see. They would just need to scrape off that extra 0.5, and they could presumably make all of these games within a 6-year window, assuming that the 6-year window is starting when The Witcher 4 releases, which seems to be the implication. I still think it's pretty ambitious. It doesn't give them a lot of wiggle room. I would say it's a better bet to say that they could maybe do it in 8 years, but also, like, dev timelines keep getting longer. I don't know. It seems really ambitious to me, but it'll be cool if they can pull it off, and each of the games is of good quality, is all I will say.
Yeah. I live in constant hope that some studio or studio system will figure out the process by which they can get current AAA dev times and budgets to a manageable level. And if CD Projekt Red is capable of streamlining their development to the point where they can release 3 bangers at the scope and scale that people expect over the course of 6 to 8, even if they do it in 8 years, that would still be a pretty massive improvement over where you see the majority of AAA development, which is just like, unless you have an enormous number of people working on something, your schedules just aren't that, right? Releases between, or the time between Naughty Dog releases is evidence of this. It just doesn't happen on a normal. You get 1 game a generation at this rate, and that's just how it is. Like, if they ever make a Last of Us Part 3, it'll be on the PS6 if a PS6 is even like a thing. So, I think it's ambitious. I think it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I definitely don't think it's something I'm going to hold my breath for, though. I think it's certainly a laudable goal, if not a realistic one.
Yep. No, I definitely agree. Well, with that, I think we can probably move into our thank yous. But it was definitely fun to chat a little bit about a game that had come out so long ago. And just genuinely didn't think I would really have the opportunity to talk about The Witcher 3 in any kind of real depth, given how old it was. So definitely a cool opportunity, definitely a meaningful game for a ton of people, including myself. And I'm excited to see what the DLC looks like.
Yeah. If their goal was to try and reignite interest in The Witcher, both as a franchise and as a game specifically, I would say this, broadly speaking, worked. I am definitely excited to jump back into The Witcher sort of in advance of this. I think that I'm probably going to end up looping that into my plan for the next year of gaming, just to see if I can actually finally beat the game, because while I did love it, I actually have not beaten The Witcher 3. I ended up bouncing off of it due to some sort of college related thing, and never had a chance to get back in just because I'd already put so much time in. It felt like an insurmountable pile of things. So yeah, I mean, I would say, broadly speaking, definitely a cool opportunity to get to actually talk about it, and certainly a cool curio within an increasingly sort of confusing video game industry. It's definitely exciting to see this strategy unfold, and it will be very interesting to see how it lands, and if any other studios take notice, or if this does become a practice that anyone is interested in replicating, or if maybe, Zach, you and I were just barking up the wrong tree for an hour. So any of those are possible, but it'll certainly be interesting to keep an eye on as time progresses.
Yep. Well, I'm actually going to take the initiative with this one, and I am going to say very quickly, thank you to Mosscat Market, who was previously known as eDougie Art. It's our wonderful friend that helped us with all of our logo stuff, our album cover, which is a weird way of putting it for a podcast, but whatever. And you should just check them out. I believe they're still on Instagram under Mosscat Market, but unfortunately you can no longer find them on Etsy, so there's no way to give them money. Which is lame. Boo. But I also understand. I don't think they want to deal with all of the logistics involved there. Anyway, shoot them a follow, show them some love, and thanks again to Mosscat Market.
Yes, indeed. Always thank you to Mosscat Market. And, as always again, Beach Girl. Big thank you to Beach Girl. They are the provider of our wonderful intro and outro music, as well as the creator and curator of a digital library of music. The music itself, some of it was created somewhat digitally, but it is all available to find digitally on your preferred platforms, meaning SoundCloud, Bandcamp, Spotify, YouTube. Definitely not on there in the volume that it used to be, but still very much findable if you know where to look. And I encourage you to do so, because their music is actually extremely good. And they're not just a friend of the show, they are someone that I have listened to consistently over the years. So do go show Beach Girl some love as well. And Tell them we sent you if there's a way to do that.
Sweet. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and until next time, goodbye.
Indeed.
Goodbye. Some kind of easy access to the DLC in the game. Jeez. Hiccup and a burp. I'm sorry. That was gross, y'all.